It's the Kyle Hyman Show on Redeemer Radio.
This is Kyle Hyman, and with us to talk about a really cool thing. It looks like it took a lot of work to put this together. It's a day-by-day coloring book of saints. Thanks for being here, Maria Mendell.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here, Kyle, and I'm happy to be talking to you about my book, The Day-by-Day Coloring Books of the Saints. It's published by Sophia Press, and you can find the book at sophiainstitute.com. But yes, no, you're right. It was a lot of work to put together. So I worked with this wonderfully talented illustrator, Mary MacArthur, and she just has these beautiful illustrations of the saints, and I wrote the biographies of the saints. The way that this book is put together, it is a day-by-day coloring books of the saints, so you have a saint's life for every day of the year. So I wrote the full-page biographies to go with each saint's life. So a lot of research, a lot of writing. I'm writing every day to get the saints' lives, but I really believe it'll be so inspiring for children to color these saints and to learn about them every day. And it's a beautiful thing, I think, for a parent to also do with their child, to introduce them to a special saint that day. The book is in two parts. It's the first one is January through June, and the second one is July to December. Because, as you can imagine, the books are hefty because there's a page per year. But it's a wonderful way to introduce children into the liturgical life of the church, to realize that every day is a feast day. Every day you learn about a new saint.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite saint?
I do love St. Catherine of Siena and St. Catherine of Alexandria. These are two incredible saints on fire with their faith. I also grew up loving St. Cecilia. She's my confirmation saint.
Okay.
And I discovered a lot of new saints, too, through through writing this book. There are so many saints that I had never heard of that the church celebrates and memorializes. So I'm excited to have children discover their favorite saints, too, through reading this book and coloring.
When did you first develop a devotion or appreciation of the saints?
This is a great story. So when I was younger, I was reading all of these Nancy Drew books, and my mom said, you know what? I want you to, in between each book, read a book about the saints. And so that's how she got me to then start reading the saints regularly. And as a little girl, reading these saints really inspired me. I'd read them and be like, oh, I want to start imitating these heroic figures. They made me want to be good too. And then as I grew up, I would read spiritual writers. They always say, read the lives of the saints. This is how you grow in holiness, because you watch practical applications of practical applications of virtue. And they also allow you to realize that you can behave virtuously in this world, and that you can, and that God will give you the grace if you pray to Him to be virtuous. So yes, this is something that the saints have been inspired by as a child, and then as my faith matures, their stories just really help the faith come alive to me. And it was through my parents, through my childhood, that I learned to develop my love for the saints.
Yeah, and I think what you've got here with this day-by-day coloring book of the saints is it's appropriate for all ages, but it's definitely targeting an even younger audience than your Nancy Drew book readers.
That's right.
And so kind of introducing them to really a ton of saints at potentially a young age. What actually would you say would be the minimum age for reading the stories and understanding the stories? I know some of the saints, if you study the saints very long, some of them had kind of violent endings to their lives as martyrs and things. So what would you say would be age appropriate for the readings?
Well, so we do target it as a second grade book, starting for the children reading it on their own.
Okay.
Prior to that point, you would have parents read out loud the stories to their children, and then they can color along. And in that way, the parent can monitor for themselves what they think is appropriate. Now, I did speak about martyrdoms in very simple language. These aren't graphic narrations, but I would, often close with, and then, the saint became a glorious martyr for their faith. They knew that they would see Jesus in heaven. So it's talking about martyrdom in relationship to eternal life in heaven and being with Jesus forever. So I would hope that with that simple presentation, that it then wouldn't be disturbing for a young child.
Yeah.
But yes, if as a parent your child is specifically sensitive, and since the younger children, this is meant to be read out loud while they color, you would then be able to directly give the child what it is you think that will help them grow in their faith, but also maybe reserve for older ages those that you think might disturb them.
We're talking with Maria Mendell. The book is a day-by-day coloring book of saints, and as she mentioned earlier, it's divided into two parts. So there's one book that's Volume 1, January through June, and then Volume 2 picks up where that left off. And what made you want to do a daily coloring book like this? I've seen coloring books of the saints or of Bible stories, and it just kind of pick and choose ones that they think kids would be most interested in, probably, or maybe the ones that are easiest to draw a scene from or something. I don't know. But what made you want to be like, hey, let's do one for every single day?
Well, certainly. No, that's a very good question. It really is to help parents engage their children into the liturgical life of the church, to realize that every day in the church is a feast day, and often to connect, like if you take your child to daily mass and you're celebrating something specifically, then a specific saint. We also have the feast days here presented through the general Roman calendar as well, so you can connect on this day with the liturgy. So it is about having your children live that liturgical life and to do something every day. So it can be also incorporated into, let's say if you're a homeschooling parent, you can incorporate a saint for that day as part of your curriculum. Or I could imagine like CCD teachers wanting to cover these as well. So it is a way of entering a rhythm and to have a special moment every day if you can to learn about a new saint. So that was the vision behind it.
So how did you choose the saints? It looks like you picked the popular ones, definitely hit their feast days, but then on the ones where there's maybe 20 to choose from, how did you pick?
Yeah, that's right. So yes, as you mentioned, I follow the general Roman calendar. So on those days that weren't covered by the general Roman calendar, I would pour through the saints and really try to find one that I thought was interesting, that I thought would speak to children, that might teach them also maybe an aspect of the faith or history that they might not have encountered before, but always with that story in mind. And also what is maybe the virtue that saint embodies that a child might want to imitate as well. So whenever I wrote my stories and whenever the illustrator composed the pages, it's always with that story in mind of speaking to a child.
Yeah. So was this a lot of online research, or do you have a stack of 50 different saint books with all these different stories in them?
It's all combined. I have quite a few stacks of books, but there are also just wonderful resources online of saints books that are maybe no longer copyrighted, that you can just there's always this wealth of like Butler's Lives of Saints, the Catholic Encyclopedia. So it's wonderful to have these resources. So a lot of research did go into these, but also then to express that in a way that children understand is the kind of the labor then.
Sure.
I would
do. Can you share some of the maybe more obscure or less common saints that are in the book and maybe some of their stories? Just give us a little background.
Certainly. I don't know if a lot of students know about Saint Scholastica. She was Saint Benedict's sister, and they would often meet together and pray. And near her death, she wanted to speak to her brother, Saint Benedict, longer, and she prayed to God for a thunderstorm. So he couldn't leave her, and they spent the night talking about God together. Another saint that we talk about, for instance, Saint Claude de la Colombière. He was a confessor to Saint Margaret Mary, and he also helped spread the Sacred Heart devotion through France. And he was imprisoned in England because he was a Jesuit, and English was anti-Catholic at the time and thought the Jesuits were there to plot to kill the king. So it is very interesting, the history as well that you learn through these saints. But you also find out that so many saints, like no other saints. So you'll have this famous saint, and that saint's life was touched by a less famous saint. And then I would often try to then include that biography as well, so you could learn so many other saints. We have a feast day on February 17th of the 7 holy founders of the Servite order. And I had no idea who these holy founders were, but they are a group of men who had an apparition of Our Lady to help them withdraw from the world and to found their order. And they are dedicated to the 7 sorrows of Mary. And you explore what the church celebrates, and children learn so much, I think, about the history of their faith as well through reading these saints' lives.
I think it's a neat resource, and something that I like that it's daily. You can get into a habit of every day, sit down, color a page, learn about a saint, maybe either, before breakfast or before bed or before having some screen time or something like that. And just learning day by day a little bit about this. But as much as this is geared towards kids, I am positive that I would learn a ton by reading through these stories and saints that I haven't heard of and stories that I'm not familiar with, or people that I've heard of a bunch but don't really know a lot about it. So I'm sure this is just as much of a learning tool for the parents as it is for the kids. But the idea of a coloring book, is there something about connecting, especially for children, that tangible act of coloring while connecting that to the story of the saint that maybe helps them learn better, you think?
I do. I mean, they do say a picture's worth 1,000 words, right? But I think you're right. Coloring really helps interiorize that story. And I find these coloring pages particularly attractive. I think they are beautiful illustrations, interesting illustrations. And it is through that use of beauty, I think, that a child would then become attracted to the faith, that would then want to maybe, if you make a virtue attractive, then you want to imitate it. So I think by having these interesting illustrations, and also children, particularly in these days, and I think they always are, but they're particularly visual. So it's nice to have all those different senses, the hearing, the seeing, and the tactile sense of coloring engaged, so that they are then being educated through their senses as well. So yes, I do think pairing the two together really makes it memorable. I think they are probably more likely to remember the story if they are also coloring that page.
All right, very cool. Where can people go to get it? It's called the Day by Day Coloring Book of Saints. Volume 1 is January through June out now. Is Volume 2 coming soon?
Yes, it'll be out in time for July,
okay,
when you need to connect the two. Yeah, so you can find it at sophiainstitute.com. And neat tip, if you click on the book, there's actually a preview button page, so you can actually look through the entire book online before you purchase. So yes, you can see that at sophiainstitute.com. You can also order it via phone at 1-800-888-9344. The office hours are from 8 to 5, Monday through Friday at Sophia Press.
All right. Again, the Day by Day Coloring Book of Saints. Volume 1 is available now. Volume 2 coming out soon. But pick this up. Great gift. A great thing for your children, grandchildren. Thank you so much, Anna Maria, for sharing it with us.
Thank you very much. It was really nice speaking with you.